What if the man they humiliated in front of everyone wasn't just a regular traveler, but the CEO of the entire airline? And what if he had been watching silently this whole time? It happened in less than a minute. A middle-aged black man approached the counter at one of the most exclusive airport lounges in the country. He didn't look like much. Faded khakis, a cheap blazer, worn shoes, tired eyes. He wasn't loud. He wasn't pushy. He simply presented his loyalty card, black metal, embossed top tier, and waited for a welcome. Instead, he got a sentence that would echo across the nation just a week later. "Sir, this lounge is for first-class travelers only. Please wait outside. Where you belong, no shouting, no chaos. Just a calm, polished voice delivering humiliation like a blade wrapped in silk." The man said nothing. He picked up his card, nodded, and walked away. But what the woman behind the counter didn't know, what no one in that lounge knew, was that the man she had just insulted owned the entire airline. His name, Elijah Bennett, founder, billionaire, visionary, CEO of AtlasJet, the very company whose name was written across the walls of that lounge. And in that quiet moment of rejection, Elijah wasn't angry. He was ready. Because what just happened wasn't an accident. It was confirmation. Confirmation of a suspicion he'd been testing for weeks. That his company had become exactly what he'd sworn it would never be. A place where how you look matters more than who you are. So Elijah opened his leather notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote in quiet, steady ink, "Reagan National Airport, denied lounge access. Reason given, appearance not premium, card status dismissed. White male admitted immediately after." No ID check. This wasn't the beginning of his journey. This was the breaking point. And what would follow would shake the entire company to its core. Elijah Bennett wasn't always a man who commanded boardrooms. He was born in Harlem, raised by a single mother who worked 2 cleaning jobs just to afford his school books. He knew what it meant to be invisible. He knew what it felt like to walk into places and see eyes look past you like you didn't matter. That pain, that hunger for something different, is what built AtlasJet. He started it with just 2 leased planes and a rented trailer near LaGuardia. No inheritance, no favors, just grit, hustle, and a vision to build an airline that treated everyone, every single person, with dignity. And for a time it worked. But somewhere between expansion and IPOS, something changed. Whispers reached him from customers, friends, even longtime employees. Whispers of discrimination so subtle it could hide behind a smile. Passengers of color being asked to re-verify ID more often. Loyalty members with ethnic names denied upgrades. Agents who smiled for men in suits but frowned at mothers with strollers. Elijah didn't want a PR report. He didn't want spreadsheets. He wanted truth. So for 2 weeks, he disappeared from the spotlight. No camera crews, no assistants, no corporate jets. Just a fake name, Henry Cole, a fabricated persona his security team designed, and a travel plan covering 10 major cities. He traded tailored suits for a second-hand blazer and clearance rack shoes. He flew coach, sat in row 27, ate overpriced terminal pretzels like everyone else. And everywhere he went, he wrote, observed, measured. He didn't need drama, he needed patterns. And by the time he reached DC, he had them. That morning at Reagan, when the woman told him to wait outside where he belonged, something inside him crystallized. Because in that moment, he didn't see himself. He saw every person who had been quietly pushed aside. He saw the elderly black woman who had diamond status, but was told to wait until her group was called, only to see a young white man escorted on board 5 minutes later. He saw the Latino couple in Phoenix who were denied an upgrade because the list was full, then watched another traveler get bumped up 10 minutes later without explanation. He saw the black teenager in Atlanta who had flown over 50,000 miles that year, but was pulled for random security 3 times in 2 months. And now it had happened to him, in his own lounge, in his own company, by employees who had no idea who they were talking to. And that meant the rot was real. It wasn't one bad hire. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was systemic. Later that day, Elijah boarded a flight to Denver. He chose a middle seat in the back of the plane near the restrooms. Again, not because he had to, but because he wanted to watch. At the gate, a young Latina mother was struggling to fold her stroller while balancing a screaming toddler on one hip. The agent looked right at her and turned away. Moments later, a man in a designer coat walked up. The same agent smiled, offered help, and personally carried his briefcase down the jet bridge. Elijah opened his notebook. Denver Terminal. Agent. Kevin R. Assistance denied to woman with child. Briefcase carried for white male in Burberry coat. No request made. He flipped to the next page. Phoenix, Dallas, Boston. It was the same song, different cities. Loyalty status meant nothing if you didn't look the part. And then came the flight to Chicago. That's where the story changed forever. It started small. A flight attendant slid into the seat beside him, off-duty, hoodie with the Atlas Jet logo, name tag still on her bag. Diane Walker. He paid no attention at first, until he saw the glow of her phone screen and the name at the top of her text thread, Thomas Reed. Elijah's heart slowed. Reed wasn't just anyone. He was a regional director, a fast-climbing executive who had pushed hard for efficiency reforms and optics-focused service. And what Elijah saw next confirmed his worst fears. Diane. Some guy made a fuss in ATL, looked like a professor. Didn't fit the premium profile. Sarah flagged him Reed. Good. LAX should do the same. Optics matter. Flag early, Diane. Already done. Re-verify ID at check-in. Security if needed, Reed. Keep it quiet. You know the drill. Elijah didn't flinch. He just wrote it all down. This wasn't unconscious bias. It was procedure. They weren't treating people differently by accident. They were training them to. When the plane landed, Elijah didn't go home. He went straight to a hotel, pulled every notebook from his bag, spread them across the desk, and called Vanessa. This is deeper than we thought, he said. They've written it into the system. Flagging passengers for how they look, not behavior, not security, just appearance. Vanessa said nothing at first. Then she whispered, "We're going to burn this from the root." The next morning, Elijah shaved, pressed a suit, and walked into Atlas Jet headquarters as himself. Not Henry Cole. He had seen enough. It was time for a reckoning. And it would start with the entire management team. Elijah Bennett stepped into the towering glass lobby of Atlas Jet's Chicago headquarters wearing the one thing that had made people look at him differently his entire life. A suit. But this time, it wasn't about appearance. It was armor. And he wasn't here to blend in anymore. He was here to confront the very system he had unknowingly allowed to grow inside his empire. He didn't go to his private office. He didn't stop for coffee or check his calendar. Instead, he walked straight into the 38th floor war room, his private conference space reserved only for crisis meetings, and asked his executive assistant to bring him one person, Vanessa Hart. She arrived moments later, sharp as always, dressed in all black, with a stack of files under her arm, and a look that told him she already knew. No greetings, no small talk. They sat across from each other at the long steel table, and Elijah placed his notebook in front of them. "Are we ready?" he asked. Vanessa nodded and opened her folder. "We've cross-referenced every incident you documented with system flags, employee chat logs, customer feedback, and flight reports." "Elijah, it's worse than we thought." He leaned forward, jaw tight. Over 240 passengers had been manually flagged in the last year for what the internal system described as verification checks. But the reasons were never tied to suspicious behavior or unusual booking patterns. The flags were entered based on appearance. Notes like "doesn't match profile," "under review," or the more disturbing off-brand optics. The data showed that over 80% of these flagged individuals were people of color. A large percentage flew with active diamond status. Many had spent tens of thousands of dollars with the airline. Some were traveling with children, others were elderly. None had violated policy, but they had all been singled out. Elijah stared at the numbers, heart pounding with a quiet, cold fury. Who approved these protocols? Vanessa flipped to another file. It was filled with printed emails, internal memos, and screenshots of Slack messages. each one stamped with the same name, Thomas Reed. A regional director praised for cost-cutting and efficiency, promoted after a merger with Western Eagle Airlines, known inside the company as a rising star with disruptive vision. In one message, Reed wrote, "Premium image must be preserved. We're not just selling flights, we're selling brand experience." Another, "If appearance doesn't align with premium expectations, flag and delay discreetly." And then, the most chilling, "Teach the front line to trust their instincts. If it feels off-brand, it probably is." Elijah didn't say a word. He simply picked up his pen and underlined that last sentence in red. Vanessa continued. Training slides were rolled out quietly to 3 regional hubs. They never used the words race or class, but the images said it all. White businessmen in suits labeled priority, black and brown passengers in hoodies labeled standard. She placed the final page in front of him, a system report showing every time a manual flag had resulted in a service denial, upgrade declined, lounge blocked, ID re-verified, security escalation triggered. "These are just the ones we caught," she said. "There are probably hundreds more buried under vague reasons." Elijah closed the folder slowly, sat back, and stared out the glass wall of the conference room. Planes lifted into the sky like silver birds chasing dreams. But inside, he felt like one of his engines had just caught fire. "Bring the board in," he said, his voice steady. "Today." Vanessa didn't ask questions. She knew what was coming. This wasn't just a performance review, it was a purge. By noon, every board member of AtlasJet had filed into the executive conference room, 14 of them, most men, some women, all dressed in the expensive armor of people who thought they had nothing to fear. Elijah walked in last. No smile, no greetings. Just a thick binder under his arm and the weight of 10 cities on his shoulders. He stood at the head of the table. Vanessa connected her laptop to the screen. "I'm not here to present a report," Elijah began. "I'm here to expose a rot that has infected this company. A rot that bears my name. And if we don't cut it out now, we will lose everything. Our customers, our people, our reputation, and our soul." One board member, a gray-haired man named Larson, shifted in his chair. "Elijah, if this is about the DC incident, surely that was just one employee?" "No," Elijah cut in. "It wasn't." He opened his notebook and began to read. Slowly, calmly, page after page. Boston, black woman, Diamond member, denied early boarding. White man behind her escorted forward Denver. Latino couple, denied upgrade. Same agent later upgraded solo white traveler Dallas. Lounge rejection, black man, me, card dismissed. Next traveler, white male, no check, welcomed with a drink. He paused. In all 10 cities, I went undercover. No perks, no assistant, just me, a fake name, and this notebook. The room fell into a stunned silence. "Elijah," another board member said, "are you saying you—" "Yes," he said. "I traveled as Henry Cole, and I saw the truth, not because I read it in a survey, but because I lived it." He signaled Vanessa. Charts appeared on the screen. Data, percentages, trends, the numbers that couldn't lie. 80% of manual flags were for passengers of color. 60% of those flagged had elite loyalty status. 30% had filed complaints, none of which reached the executive level. And in nearly all cases, the justification was labeled with vague terms like customer verification or security precaution. Then came the emails. Thomas Reed's words, the slide decks, the training screenshots, and finally the message thread from the off-duty flight attendant who had unknowingly exposed the secret system. One board member murmured, "This is worse than anything we've seen." Another whispered, "How did this get past us?" But Larson, arms crossed, spoke up. "We need to be careful here. Appearance matters in the premium space. Customers expect a certain environment. If we overcorrect, we risk damaging that perception." Elijah's eyes snapped to him. "Let me ask you something, Larson. When I mortgaged my home to lease the first 2 planes for this company, did I look like someone who belonged in a first-class lounge?" Larson said nothing. "When I was pushing baggage carts in the rain at LaGuardia because we couldn't afford ground crew, Did I look like a premium passenger? Still silence. No, Elijah continued. But I built this airline with grit, with honesty, with a promise that respect, not appearance, would be our foundation. He let that hang in the air. Right now, we are not a premium airline. We are a discriminatory one. And the cost of that is far greater than anything on a spreadsheet. He turned to the board. I'm calling for the immediate termination of Thomas Reed and every employee connected to this system, the shutdown of all discretionary flagging protocols, full retraining of customer-facing staff, and the creation of an independent passenger advisory council reporting directly to my office. A beat of hesitation passed. Then Vanessa added, we already have class action interest. Civil rights groups are monitoring the situation. If we wait, we won't be in control of the narrative. The CFO flipped through the projected financial hit. Short-term losses could be steep, he warned. Elijah nodded. But the cost of staying silent is permanent. The vote was called. 10 yes, 2 abstentions. None dared vote no. Thomas Reed was summoned to the executive floor minutes later. He walked in with his usual arrogance, expecting praise. Instead, he saw Elijah waiting alone in the conference room, a single file open on the table. Sit down, Thomas, Elijah said without looking up. What's this about? Reed asked, trying to smile. Elijah turned the file toward him. Every flag, every email, every message. You created a system that told our employees to judge worth by clothing and skin color. Reed tried to defend himself. Called it brand management. Mentioned premium expectations. Elijah stood. You don't work here anymore. Security entered. Reed's access was revoked. His badge pulled. By that evening, footage of him being escorted out had hit social media. And it wasn't just Reed. In the next 48 hours, 17 employees were removed. Karen Holt, the lounge manager who told Elijah to wait outside, tried to explain that she didn't know who he was. That's the problem, Elijah told her. You shouldn't have to know. You should treat every passenger with dignity. She was fired on the spot. Diane Walker, the flight attendant, was dismissed after being confronted with her own texts. Other agents followed. The message was clear. This wasn't about optics anymore. It was about justice. And Elijah Bennett had just declared war on a culture that wore a suit but hid a sickness. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it for everyone who had ever been told to wait outside. The fallout was immediate. In terminals across the country, from LAX to JFK, the whispers started before the headlines even hit. Did you hear what happened at Atlas Jet? CEO went undercover. He got kicked out of his own lounge. They fired 17 people, managers, agents, flight crew. By the time the media caught on, it was already too late to control the storm. Elijah Bennett's face was on every screen. Not in a polished ad campaign, not in a corporate earnings call, but in raw footage, sleeves rolled up, standing in front of his employees, eyes burning with truth. He wasn't there to spin, he was there to lead. That Monday morning, every Atlas Jet employee, over 32,000 across the globe, logged into a mandatory live broadcast. Screens lit up in break rooms, hangars, customer service pods, and airport lounges. Even pilots tuned in from tarmacs. No music, no corporate logo spinning. Just Elijah standing in a hangar with a single plane behind him, its engine silent. He didn't speak from a script. He didn't rehearse. He looked directly into the camera and said, I was told to wait outside, in a lounge I built, with a card I earned. At an airline I created, he let that sit. Not because I broke policy, not because I was a threat, but because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged. You could hear the silence across 32,000 rooms. Elijah continued, voice firm but never raised. If I, as your CEO, can be judged that way, what do you think happens to our passengers every day? Our loyal customers, our working parents, our elders, our kids? This is not about hurt feelings. This is about human dignity. He stepped closer to the camera. We failed, but we will fix it. Behind him, the hangar doors opened slowly, sunlight flooding in, and a second plane was revealed, its fuselage painted with a new message. Every passenger counts. The image went viral in seconds. Within hours, hashtag every passenger counts was trending worldwide. But Elijah wasn't chasing hashtags. He was rebuilding a broken soul. That very afternoon, he signed an executive order ending all discretionary flagging across the company. Every flag now required digital justification, time-stamped, reviewed by a third-party accountability board, and visible to customers in their own app. No more silent profiling, no more shadow notes. He also launched a $75 million passenger dignity fund, not hush money, not coupons. Real compensation, reviewed by a board that included civil rights leaders, frontline staff, and frequent flyers. But perhaps the most revolutionary change came with his next announcement. Every executive in this company, including myself, will now be required to work 3 days a year on the ground. No offices, no titles, just sleeves rolled up, check-in counters, baggage handling, coach seating. You will look people in the eye. You will carry their bags. You will remember who we serve. Some investors pushed back. Elijah answered them with a single line. The cost of injustice is always greater. Then came the lawsuits. Former employees tried to claim wrongful termination. Media analysts debated whether the reform would backfire. But something else happened no one expected. People started coming back. Customers who had quietly abandoned the airline began booking again. Not for the perks, not for the miles, but because something rare had happened. A CEO had not just admitted failure. He had felt it, lived it, and changed course. Corporate contracts were renewed. Ratings improved. And for the first time in years, Atlas Jet's customer satisfaction hit record highs. But for Elijah, numbers were not the goal. The goal was the quiet moments, the small victories. Like the day he walked through Dallas-Fort Worth, in the same lounge where he had once been humiliated. He kept his distance, watched. An older black couple approached the counter. Their clothes were simple, their suitcase old. But the agent smiled, checked their diamond status, and said warmly, "Welcome back. Let me take your bags." The man looked stunned. The woman nearly cried. Elijah didn't step in. He just turned away, eyes misting, knowing the change had finally reached the ground. Another day in Atlanta, he watched as a young Latina girl, barely 12, stepped nervously to the gate with her mother. The girl wore a tiny backpack and clutched a boarding pass in both hands. The agent knelt, smiled, and said, "You ready for takeoff, sweetheart? Come on, you're first today." That girl looked like Elijah's own niece, like the little kid he used to be. In that moment, he didn't care about margins, or quarterly reviews, or what the business journals would say, because that child had been treated like she mattered. And that was the point. But the reckoning wasn't over. For the ones who had enforced the broken system, the consequences had only begun. Karen Holt, the lounge manager, was named in multiple lawsuits from passengers whose video clips had gone viral. Her name became a warning in HR training nationwide. Diane Walker, the flight attendant who had laughed about flagging customers, was barred from working at any U.S. carrier for 10 years under federal sanctions. She applied for work overseas, but was denied visas. Thomas Reed, the architect of it all, faced the harshest fall. His emails were subpoenaed. He was dragged into regulatory hearings. Business schools dissected his memos in ethics classes titled "How Not to Lead." His name became synonymous with hidden discrimination. But Elijah didn't gloat. When a reporter asked if he felt satisfied watching Reed fall, Elijah said, "This was never about punishment. It was about correction. I take no joy in another man's ruin, but I will not let a single person rewrite my company's values in secret." That line was quoted in papers around the world. Respect is not a feature, it is the flight. It became Atlas Jet's slogan, not for marketing, but for mission, and over time, it transformed the industry. Other airlines began quietly rolling out their own reforms. Training modules changed. Data tracking became transparent. Industry conferences cited Atlas Jet as the example of what true accountability looked like. But the most powerful moment came 6 months later. Elijah was walking through JFK. No cameras, no suit, just him. He passed gate 28 and saw a little black boy holding his mother's hand, looking up at the jet bridge nervously. Before they could step forward, the gate agent knelt down and said, Hey, young man, you ready to fly? You belong here, Elijah froze. Those words, they were the opposite of what he had heard. And in that moment, he knew the cycle had been broken. Not fully, not forever, but enough for the next child to start his journey with dignity, not shame. Later that night, Elijah returned to his office. He opened his old leather notebook, now filled to the edges, and turned to the last page. He wrote just one sentence: respect restored. But never finished. Then he closed the notebook, placed it on the shelf, not as a record of what had gone wrong, but as a monument to what had finally gone right. And somewhere in a living room, a young boy with skin as dark as Elijah's watched that story play out on a video. He turned to his mom and whispered, "I want to build something too one day." That was the legacy. Not planes, not profits, but the courage to say, "We belong here." All of us in the refusal, no matter what, to ever wait outside again.